Welcome to the Disability and Philanthropy Forum's Disability Equity Series. My name is Gail Fuller, and I'm the Chief of External Affairs at the Disability and Philanthropy Forum. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm joining you from the land of the Seminoles. I live in Winter Garden, Florida. Today's webinar is brought to you in partnership with grantmakers concerned with immigrants and refugees. As part of our commitment to accessibility, our panelists and I will each provide an audio descriptions of ourselves. I am a Black woman with a non-apparent disability. I am wearing red glasses and a blue blouse with dark blue and white flowers. My hair is in a bob, and behind me is a colorful painting on the wall. Four young Black boys are all laughing. For me, it's the essence of Black boy joy at its peak. A few housekeeping items to go through. And so we're going to go through here. So just a reminder, so there are two ways to access live captions today. You can use the closed caption button at the bottom of your screen, or you can access the captions in a separate window, which will be sent to you in the chat. Today, only the moderators and panelists will be on screen. You will be muted throughout this event. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the recording in the next few weeks. Although we will be using the chat to share links with you, it will not be available to communicate out. Instead, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to share your questions anytime during the session. We will try to integrate them into discussion as they come in, and we will also make time for questions at the end. If the Q&A is not accessible to you, feel free to send questions to communications@disabilityphilanthropy.org. We will also have a poll question. And if you would take a few moments to complete the poll question. We're done. We will see the results of the poll. This is kind of to help set the stage of who's with us today. And thank you for being with us. All right. Okay. So many of you are here to learn. I am biased, but I think the Disability and Philanthropy Forum is a great place to learn, and we have such wonderful panelists. Before we start, let's take a moment, like we said, to look at the results. So first of all, thank you, Marissa and Khadija and Elisa, for being here today. I am going to turn it over to Marissa to begin, and thank you for moderating today.
Thank you so much, Gail, and to the entire forum team for the invitation to be here today. My name is Marissa Torona. I'm the president of Grantmakers Concerned with Immigrants and Refugees. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a brown woman with a non-apparent disability. I have chin-length black hair. I'm wearing an orange sweater, and I have a gold locket. And I also have a gold locket. I'm based in Oakland, California, the land of the Ohlone people, but today I'm calling in from Minneapolis, which is the land of the Dakota people. I'm really grateful to be a part of this conversation and have been looking forward to it because, as Gail points out, the forum does a wonderful job with its learning webinars, and I'm really excited to learn from our esteemed panelists. I also want to say that I will do anything that Sandy asks me to do. So a lot of gratitude to Sandy, to Gail, and to the entire team for the invitation to be a part of this conversation. The GSER team is very grateful to be in partnership with all of you. I'm really pleased to welcome Kutsia Naki and Elisa Alquincela, who are here to share with us their insights and their expertise and their strategies and their analysis. I believe in the chat there might be links to their bios, and because we want to get into the conversation, I'm going to invite you to take a look at their more detailed bios there. And let's get started with some shorter, if that's okay, Kutsia and Elisa, self-introductions. Let's start by each of you sharing your name, pronouns, a visual description. You can also share with us where you're based if you would like to, and one sentence that you would like the audience to know about yourself. Let's start first with Kutsia, and then we'll go to Elisa.
Thank you so much, Marissa. And I'm so grateful to be in community with all of you. Thank you for being here. Community is a great solace right now in these difficult times. And huge thanks to both the Disability and Philanthropy Forum and GSER for having me. My name is Kutsia Naki, as Marissa mentioned. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a South Asian woman with dark hair, which is curly and just below my shoulders, dark eyes, and medium brown skin. Today, I am wearing a black dress with a bright pink blazer, and I identify as blind. So just a sentence about me. As a law professor, my pedagogical approach, legal scholarship, and media work aim to center disability justice and the disabled experience as tools that can catalyze transformative cultural, legal, and policy change towards a more just, accessible, and equitable society, including a radical reimagining of how we think about immigration. Thank you so much.
Buenos días, buenas tardes. My name is Elisa Aucancela. I use she, her, ella pronouns. I'm based in Colorado. I am a Puerto Rican Latina woman with a disability in my late 40s with light brown skin, eyes, and hair. I'm wearing a green blouse with a brown sweater over it. I am the executive director of El Grupo Vida, and El Grupo Vida serves immigrants with disabilities and their families in Colorado, offering a variety of programs focused in two main areas: immigration rights and disability justice.
Thank you so much for introducing yourselves. Before we get into your analysis and your strategies and your expertise, there's a new cruelty that's being visited upon our communities almost hourly. It's been described as challenging times, troubling times. I think we're running out of adjectives to describe what we're all experiencing right now. So before we hear from both of you in terms of, again, your analysis and strategies, I'd like to start with, how are you both coming into the conversation today, and how are you doing? Elisa, if you don't mind, if you could start us off, and then we'd also like to hear from you, Kutsia.
Yes, I come with a lot of mix of emotion of what is happening in our communities, but also hope. And hope provide opportunity to not just looking what is happening now, but what we can do, what is in our control. And yeah, I'm happy to be here. Also, I'm happy to talk about one of the topics that is in my heart, and how to share what is in the ground, in what the organization is supporting and providing for our immigrants with disability community in Colorado.
That was so well said. This is Kutsia speaking. I am showing up today both with a great sense of urgency for all of us to come together to talk about the times that we are in now, and particularly the impacts they are having on folks who are immigrants and who have disabilities. So I'm really grateful to be in that conversation, especially with someone like Elisa and Marissa and all the others who planned this webinar, because you are all just doing incredible work on the ground with the people who are most affected by all of these issues that we're going to talk about today. And also because I think we are living in a time when we are being told that we are being divided, we are being isolated from one another, and the fact that we are even coming together here today at all is an incredible moment of resistance, in my view. And I often think of a quote by our disabled ancestor, Audre Lorde, who said, "It is not our differences that divide us, It is our inability to recognize, accept, and celebrate those differences. So I look forward to celebrating our differences together today.
I'm appreciating the call for hope in this time of urgency and the call for the celebration of our differences as we move together in resistance. So let's turn to my favorite topic, the Supreme Court. I don't know these days, probably not, but you know, that's your cue, Kutsia. Let's talk a little bit about the Supreme Court, and in particular, their shadow docket decision in the Vasquez-Perdomo case, which effectively, as many of us know, sanctions the use of racial profiling in immigration enforcement. If you could offer, Kutsia, a little bit of context around the situation, and then provide an analysis and explanation around how this shadow docket decision, and let's be really clear that that's what it is, impacts disabled immigrants and non-citizen individuals with disabilities.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. And talking about this case reminds me of the book on tyranny by Timothy Snyder that some of you might be familiar with. It has this very helpful kind of collection of strategies and rules to guide us as we combat fascism. And the number one rule or call that Professor Snyder starts with in this book is do not obey in advance. And I think that this case is a really good example of that. So to your point, Marissa, yes, this was a case that was decided on the court's shadow docket, sometimes referred to as the emergency docket and by various other names. All it was doing, it is not a case that was decided on the merits, but all it was doing was the government ran to the Supreme Court to ask for a stay, for a stop on the enforcement of a temporary restraining order that was issued by a California District Court judge to address ICE's behaviors in Los Angeles. And my love and support goes out to everyone in Los Angeles right now who are dealing with all of these issues right now. So specifically, the district court, after a very, very, very robust factual record that was presented by the folks who brought this lawsuit, concluded that certain of ICE's practices were potentially unconstitutional and issued this temporary restraining order to stop ICE. Specifically, the targeting of people based on whether they looked, quote, Mexican, whether they spoke Spanish, whether they worked low-wage jobs, and whether they were in locations that were often frequented, supposedly by undocumented folks. And of course, we know that disabled folks also who are non-citizens, who are undocumented, who are immigrants, who are US citizens, often work in these low-wage jobs, are often people of color. Research has shown us that more than 50% of violent police encounters in general involve people of color with disabilities. So there's a lot of compounding, right, of someone who appears to be an immigrant and a disabled person. And the majority's opinion in this shadow docket decision actually says nothing about whether or not racial profiling is indeed constitutional. And I regret, to the regret of myself and many other immigration lawyers, that the media is presenting this case in this way. It's really Justice Kavanaugh's concurrence, in which he wrote alone, may I add, that he seems to suggest that these four practices that the California District Court was trying to stop may not necessarily run afoul of the Fourth and Fifth Amendments of the Constitution that protect people's rights when it comes to law enforcement encounters. So that is very important to remember. And I think that this kind of inaccurate or misinformation going out into the public just clearly reminds us of the incredible importance of funding, supporting, and making sure that we are educating the public and the communities that are most affected by these practices, that they still have rights, that the Fourth and Fifth Amendment are very much alive and well today, that this decision does not mean that they have to obey in advance, that they can resist and they can assert these rights. And the same is true for those who are disabled, who are tangled up in this enforcement as well, whether they are undocumented, lawful immigrants, citizens, whatever the case may be, that disability rights are still alive and well, and that those rights must be asserted in these encounters when folks are detained. So just a really good example of how important accurate and clear information is for people.
Kutsia, among other things, I appreciate your reminder to us that the Fourth and Fifth Amendments are still in play and are still the law in this country. And I also appreciate you bringing in on tyranny, which is a fantastic resource for those who may not be familiar with it. You know, we know that, to your point, the resistance to the enforcement that's happening is within communities. And so I want to pivot to Elisa because of the work that you are doing with communities in Colorado. And Colorado is a state that's often overlooked in discussions about immigration because it is not a border state. It's not located in the southern region of the United States. So I think what would be helpful for those who are attending this webinar is if you could paint a picture of what is happening on the ground in communities, right? With your work in disability justice and immigration. Tell us a little bit about not only what is happening with communities, but also what's the ecosystem that you're working in. Sorry, and I have a follow-up question, apologize in advance. How are the communities you serve, how are they being affected by social services that are being cut off, like Medicaid and Social Security? So there's a couple of questions in there, and we really want to hear about what's happening on the ground in Colorado.
Marisa, the way that you say, Colorado has experienced significant demographic shift in recent years. While not a border state, we see increasing numbers of immigrant families arriving, many with children or family members with disabilities. These families face unique challenges at the intersection of immigration status and disability that create complex barriers to support. Some of them have been applying for asylum seekers, and this is another process because it's kind of this gray area. You have right for different things, but you are not yet 100% until the judge inform you, yes, we're providing the asylum. We are seeing in El Grupo Vida a variety of difficulties and challenges, such as service gap. While Colorado has some strong disability services, there are critical shortages of cultural and linguistic appropriate support. Most disability services are not designed with immigrants' families in mind, and most immigrant services are not equipped to address disability needs. This is why El Grupo Vida is supporting families. But one of the huge issues that we are facing is limited funding. We are working with more demands due to many organizations reducing their services. We are seeing an increase of immigrants in high risk of eviction or unhoused. As a response, we established a program to support unhoused families with children, as well as young and elderly with disability. This year, we have less funding to support this program. The other thing that we are seeing is shifting political landscape. Colorado has implemented some immigrant-friendly policy, but that constantly changing federal immigration policy create confusion and fear that directly impact families' willingness to access disability services. And Medicaid, it's complex. While we have expanded Medicaid, many immigrant families face a complex eligibility landscape based on status. Children with disability may qualify while parents don't. Created fragment healthcare for families. The application process itself is overwhelming without cultural appropriate navigation support. We have currently a program that supports families apply for benefits here in Colorado, but just only one person for all Colorado. And Social Security barrier, many families we serve struggle with SSI application and more when we have mixed families, non-US citizen parents with children, U.S. citizen children. Um, the, the, the other thing that I can share is fear and misinformation. The public charge rule change in recent years create lasting fear and confusion. Even though many disability services don't affect immigration status, families remain hesitant to access benefits their children legally qualify for, fearing of immigration consequences. And one of the things that we are doing is we are members of 3 different coalitions that these coalitions are doing advocacy work and have helped pass bills to support our community. And they are Colorado Immigrant Right Coalition, Colorado Cross Disability Coalition, and Colorado Family Coalition.
I think there's so much that resonates with me in terms of the myriad ways your organization operates at the intersections of incredibly complex systems. And I'm sitting with the one of the many data points you shared, but that there is one person in the entire state of Colorado who is helping communities navigate a certain intersection. Both of you remarked on the dangerous power of misinformation and disinformation in different ways. So just sort of sitting with that as a theme in terms of what you're observing and experiencing as you support communities. I want us, if we could, sort of zoom out a little bit and take an even more sort of historical perspective on where we are now. We know that historically disabled immigrants have faced both ableism and racism, with some being targets for eugenics and many others being expelled or deported simply because of their disabilities. How do the foundations of ableism and racism, bring us to where we are in the current situation of this country? And again, both of you have alluded to it in your remarks, but would love to hear from you more on that historical perspective. I think we'll start first with you, Kutsia.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just like to start by saying I could give an entire lecture about this history because it is deep and it is deeply rooted, and began really in 1882 with the Chinese Exclusion Act, which first established this concept of the public charge that Elisa so sort of eloquently and clearly described in terms of how it manifests for people today. So it is a long history, and there are a lot of resources that one can turn to really understand it better. One book that I particularly recommend is J. Timothy Dolmage's work, which talks about Disabled Upon Arrival, which is a wonderful ethnohistory of disability in the immigration system starting in the late 19th century and through the first half of the 20th century. So highly recommend that work. In terms of how this is manifesting today, ableism in the immigration system is still very much alive and well. And in my writing, in a paper that I co-authored with Nirmina Rastu, who is a professor at CUNY Law School in the Immigrant and Non-Citizen Rights Clinic, called Standing on Our Own 2 Feet. We talk about how these ingrained ableist policies have survived over time in different ways. And I want to talk specifically about 3 ways in which they manifest. The first is very much connected to what Elisa was talking about more specifically, which is this idea of disabled people and also people of racial minorities in the US. So of course, as we know, race and disability compound in so many different ways, are viewed as burdens of society and only given value based on how much they can produce in terms of human labor that supports capitalism. And so whether that's laboring in our farm fields, having your ability to remain in this country based on whether or not you need public assistance, the public charge rule remains, and as Elisa clearly discussed, is still affecting families and making them make really, really hard choices about how they live their lives and forcing their bodies to conform to this capitalistic notion of sort of productivity. The second is the system continues to rob people of their own sense of self-determination. We talked about that when we talked about Vasquez Perdomo in the context of immigration enforcement, but also, I mean, myriad different policies that exist in the immigration system. I think due process isn't really what we're experiencing right now, but to the extent that there was some at some point, in terms of evidentiary requirements and, this notion of, okay, if I want to get some sort of prosecutorial discretion, I have to prove that I am disabled enough to deserve the pity of the government, for example, and not being able to assert my disability identity in the ways that I want to in the system because I have to sort of comport to a narrative that's going to get me access to that permanent immigration status. So that's an example of where self-determination comes in terms of access. Just an absolute lack of it in the system, despite our disability rights laws. Some of you may be familiar that there is ongoing litigation because the administration has attempted to shutter the Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties within the Department of Health and Human Services, which is critical to enforcing the disability rights laws and language access within DHS, including ICE and CBP, et cetera. And then finally, the visibility of disabled immigrants, both inside of the system and not. I know data is a very fraught issue, and the ways in which this administration have been using or not using government statistics, firing statistical agency heads because they don't produce data that the administration wants to see, et cetera. But if we have no understanding of the experiences of people with disabilities in the immigration system or the challenges they're facing, and we can't put sort of evidence to that, it is very difficult to advocate for resources for better civil rights enforcement, better accommodations, et cetera. And that is an area where, and I'll talk about this more later, funding can be really critical given the fact that we can't sort of at the moment trust the government to collect this kind of data and make it publicly available. So those are just some ways in which that ableism, that devaluing of disabled bodies and minds has continued to manifest in our modern system.
Thank you for that additional context, Kutsia. It's a reminder to all of us, right? When we live in ahistoric times and historical context is devalued, we don't make the connections to the cruelties and the harms that are being experienced now, that they have deep roots in how systems have been constructed over time. Elisa, I'll turn to you. What additional insights would you have to offer around how ableism and racism are contributing to the current context we're in?
Well, when a family decided to move from a specific country, is due to save, due to not receiving what they need for their children or for their young adult with disability. When they come here, they are looking to feel safe. And currently, what is happening in our community, we are not feeling that due to what is happening, in our federal government. Therefore, it's more layer of discrimination due to language, due to not knowing what is the right sometimes. They come from other countries that possible they don't have the same services that we have here. In that case, they are kind of a disconnect of I come from a better support or I feel safe, but now I'm not feeling safe because it doesn't matter if I'm doing the correct way of requesting asylum or doing different things to really be here and provide for my family. I cannot do it, or if I do, I don't have the possible, I don't know what is going to happen to me. I don't know if I go to work and something can happen and somebody can kidnap me, and then I will not be able to provide the support for my families. Therefore, everything changed in the family. In that case, we are seeing more and more layers of difficulties for the families who are coming to really be part of the community, to really feel that, you know, I moved from one place that I didn't feel safe, and now I'm in a place that I want to feel safe, but now I don't. In that case, how do I connect with system? How do I trust with people that I that I don't know if I'm able, if I don't know if I do it, something happened to me. In that case, it's a lot of layers for our families that we work, that they are continually kind of checking and try to really understand everything. Mental health, we have not talked about that, but this is another layer of situation, that how do I receive support when I don't trust the system? In that case, I feel that is more people isolated and more in fear to go to school, fear of going to different, to go to the hospital when they need, to the police when something happened. How do we change that when the system doesn't provide this safe support?
Thank you, Elisa. I want to stay with you. I'm going to come back to you on this next question because I want us to talk about funding, right? We're here on a webinar with funders. So let's have the conversation about the supports and resources that are needed to address and again support communities and families that are living in fear and experiencing this trauma that you were just describing. So Elisa, let's go to you then on this first question around funding. To talk a little bit about how El Grupo Vito has been impacted by the reductions in funding. I'm curious also about how the coalitions that you're a part of, you named 3, have also been impacted. You know, there are funders who are on this call who are looking to redirect more resources into immigrant and disabled communities. So what do they need to be aware of?
Thank you, Marisa. A lot of questions. Yes, we have an amazing opportunity to build these 3 coalitions, and one of them is Colorado Immigrant Right Coalition, is the led coalition of immigrant advocacy and policy. They have provided a variety of programs such as Know Your Right training, and we partnered with them to give Know Your Right training specifically for people with disability. Also legal services and family preparedness package, and more other. The Colorado Family Coalition and Colorado Cross Disability Coalition has been providing that connection to not be by ourselves. Like, it's like be in community, really support the work that we are doing. Challenges, a lot of challenges. Cultural linguistic barriers. Many traditional funding models don't account for the resources needed for truly cultural competent services. Translation is not enough. We need cultural brokers, adaptations, bilingual staff, and culturally relevant programming. Also, the complex system navigation. Our families face overwhelming challenges navigating fragmented system across healthcare, education, immigration, and disability services. Funding needs to support comprehensive navigation assistance that address these intersecting needs. And we are doing that in El Grupo Vida. But again, we are just only, I said one, we are 6 full-time staff trying to do our best to support our families. The demand has been high, but the funding has been low. The other is legal security concerns. Many immigrants, families with disabled children fear accessing service due to immigration status concerns. Funders must understand the critical need for legal protection framework and confidential service delivery models. And sustainability challenges. Short-term grant cycle often don't allow for build sustainable infrastructure. Our communities need consistent long-term support to creating lasting change. And community leadership development, because I'm seeing more and more leaders that they are overwhelmed, they are almost burned out. And if we don't have these leaders in the community, now what's next? In that case, how do we support organizations that prioritize uh, um, organization led by those with life experience, and also to support self-care, that I think is so important. I'm dreaming with sabbatical for my staff, because I'm like, they deserve it. It's important. They're doing a really incredible job, but then again, funding it's limited at this moment. And something that I didn't share for a Grupo Vida, our funding, 45% of our funding are state and county contract. Therefore, and we know Colorado currently is in a deficit, and also different counties are in deficit. We don't know if we're going to continue have that funding if these fundings are cut. Therefore, our services and programs will be cut too.
It's a comprehensive list, and I know in a way it's comprehensive, but and also illustrative, because there are other needs that are there. And I appreciate you naming, as you did before when you talked about mental health, but this investment in the leadership, right? To sustain people so that actually it's more than survival, it's thriving. So thank you for sharing all of that in terms of what the needs are, not just for your organization, but for broadly, the coalitions and partners in the sector. Kutsia, what other insights would you offer in terms of some of the funding challenges or shortcomings that you're experiencing or observing?
Thank you, Marissa. First, I would like to begin by co-signing everything Elisa said and just applauding her and her colleagues in Colorado for the incredible intersectional, powerful work that they're doing. And also to say, many of the funders on this call are really making strong strides towards some of the things I'm going to recommend. So just want to applaud everyone for being here and hearing us talk, and also for all the work that you're already doing that touches on some of the areas I'm going to talk about. So more particularly, I wanted to identify 3 areas from my perspective, kind of from the legal advocacy side of things. So, and also the community organizing side of things. So first, I think thinking through how to do truly intersectional funding models, and I have a few ideas in this space. So really dedicating resources towards some of the coalition building that Elisa was talking about that's happening in Colorado, for example, doing cross education, for instance, between immigration legal services providers and disability legal services providers. Research that I have done in the past has uncovered just a lot of lack of understanding and knowledge and ability to dialogue together. So creating those spaces, funding those spaces, allowing for that cross education will be really, really important and helpful. And then, as I mentioned earlier, really putting resources into combating disinformation, misinformation through Know Your Rights work, and making sure that communities really understand how to protect themselves and feel kind of legally empowered, and creating those tools for folks. And then, finally, and very importantly, something that I have observed is there are a lot of great resources out there with accurate, clear information that organizations are producing. But this may seem trivial, but a lot of those resources, whether they be videos, webinars, whatever the case may be, are not accessible. So making sure that we are investing in access and inclusion, a key principle of disability justice, as many of us know, is collective access and the collective responsibility in ensuring that everyone is included and can access information regardless of disability or whatever the case may be. So that is something that needs to be invested in from a financial perspective as well. The second realm, I would say, is the importance of funding cultural work as a tool for community building, legal empowerment, and just community in general. I had the great privilege of serving as the impact producer for the film Unseen, which some of you may be familiar with, and chronicles the experiences of an aspiring social worker who is living at the intersection of immigration, disability, and mental health. And that film's impact campaign still continues in some form today and has had the film has had an incredible impact in moving communities, educating communities, making people feel seen and understood. So I cannot underestimate the power of funding cultural work. And then finally, I would be remiss if I didn't say, as an educator and a law professor, that we need to think about how we are creating that leadership pipeline for law students as well, and other legal professionals. So kind of very much connected to what Elisa was saying about the leadership pipeline and the problem of burnout, is just making sure that we are investing in our law students, making sure that immigrant folks with disabilities that are often minoritized and marginalized in the legal profession have a pathway to success, and just really investing in that, and not just at kind of the upper echelons of law schools, but thinking about schools that are access schools, that are community based, that serve immigrant students and disabled students in significant majorities, and really investing in those institutions because they are often deeply connected to their local communities as well, and are important resources for the community. So those are kind of some of the areas where I see gaps.
I'm struck with what both of you have shared in terms of there's so much clarity. It's so strategic and tactical at the same time. Like for folks around the call, there's you've got like a roadmap. You have a plan in front of you in terms of where you could move your resources. I would invite those who are on the call with us, please use the Q&A feature to pose any questions. But I'm going to ask a slightly different question for Kutsia and Elisa. And it's along the lines of, what's keeping you in this work? What's bringing you joy? What's inspiring you? Elisa, you talked about wanting to still have hope in this. So maybe we'll start with you then, Elisa. Like what's keeping you in this? Where's the joy and what's your inspiration?
I have been doing this work for 10 years, and I came as a volunteer 10 years ago. The organization was in a place that or we closed or somebody needed to take the lead, and I decided to do it for 6 months. And then again, this is my 10 years doing this work, and going from volunteer-led organizations to having now staff, and going from having abilities to be diagnosed with seizures, and uh, having a lot of very sensory integration difficulties that's really have been impact me. Therefore, why? Because I want to give more voice to people that they don't feel that they have at this moment, that I can gather information, that I can gather stories, and I can say, hey, this is happening in the community and what we can do. Not just only giving complaints, but solutions. And what solutions we have, what things we can do to really continue be connected. Something that has been very unique in El Grupo Vida, and is that we are kind of this extended family for our community, for our families, and this is why they trust in us. Therefore, if they don't trust to the system, okay, how do I talk with the system? What things do I need to do, and also how they have the tools to feel to advocate for themselves too.
For that, this is Kutsia speaking. I think for me, what's bringing me joy, as a law professor, I have such a privilege of working with young people and people who are aspiring into the profession. And that brings me hope and joy every single day to see that we are cultivating people who are ready to resist and who are ready to, work in their communities and roll up their sleeves. And that really excites me, and also making sure that those people coming up, don't have to live in this grind till they die culture. I really valued Elisa's point about sustainability. That is also critical when you're thinking about funding, not just funding the deliverables and the work, but making sure people are paid well, that they have health insurance, that they have time off, that they can rest, that they can have joy themselves. That is so, so key. And creating that balance for people and making that okay, and reacculturating ourselves outside of this capitalistic notion of production. So what's bringing me joy is being able to bring some of that to my teaching and to my work at the law school, and also just being in community, as I said at the beginning, staying together and recognizing and valuing and celebrating our differences is one of our strongest forms of resistance. So being here with you and working in the other communities I work in is something that is really sustaining me right now.
I'm really grateful that we're in community with the both of you in this conversation. And just again, coming back to this theme of sustainability for everyone on the call, we've heard that fairly consistently from both of our panelists. So, what are the investments and supports that are needed to make that happen? We have a couple of questions that have come in, and would love to hear who would like to take this first question. To learn a little bit more about how we are supporting students with disabilities, given the DOE's shift in priorities, any insights on how we can continue to support inclusion with philanthropic and external funding? Kutsi or Elisa, does one of you want to take that question?
Lisa, do you want to start from your perspective, and I can talk about the kind of higher ed
Yes,
piece?
I can. Again,
Mhm.
I have an amazing partners. I have the ARC chapter in Colorado, and they are advocates, and they have different chapters in all Colorado. Therefore, when we have a family that need direct advocacy, like a person who go to the school, we send the referrals to them, and we have the connection with them, and kind of we provide trainings too for the families to be ready to advocate. I really like, I have not had the time, but I love to do coaching. Like, be prepared for that meeting. Let's do different techniques, tools for you to feel empowered and to speak out when you feel like something is not okay, because it's fear. Like, it's like sometimes 10 people and mom and an interpreter. And how do we connect all these dots also with the young people, how they know the right, how they can advocate for themselves when they need it. In that case, I feel that partnering with other organizations, because of course we cannot do all the work, but be with them, it's really an opportunity to bring the family that we're not the only one. There are many organizations that are providing the support and are giving the time to really connect with the different systems.
Yeah, and this is Kutsia speaking. From the perspective of kind of higher education or legal education, I think disabled lawyers, or openly disabled lawyers, are grossly underrepresented in the profession. They're represented at law schools, and we just need to, a couple of things I would say about this is, number one, I think philanthropy can really play a role in helping legal faculties and giving them the tools and resources to rethink how we design legal education to be more inclusive and accessible to a broader swath of students and prospective students. I have the great honor and privilege of sitting on the board of the National Disabled Legal Professionals Association, which is really trying to build this pipeline in collaboration with the National Disabled Law Students Association. So putting resources into organizations like that are helping to build the capacity of students to get through law school, to make sure that they assert their rights, both in the higher education context and then also in the employment context once they come into the profession. I think supporting these types of efforts is really critical so that we can have a strong pipeline of leadership, and that we can ensure the success of these folks in higher education more broadly, but also speaking from my perspective as a law professor and someone working in legal education, I think it's really, really critical that the population of advocates reflects the communities that are being served and it's of those communities, regardless of what type of law they practice.
There's a great question. Thank you both. There's a great question that's come in. And, you know, we've been talking a lot about how institutional funders, right? Those with organizations with lots of resources can support the work that you're doing and the work that your allies and peers are doing as well. And the question is, as an individual who may not be in a position to fund the coalition, broad strategy efforts that you are all engaged in, what are some small efforts that individuals, communities, neighborhoods could do to help? Elisa, I think you're smiling, so
Oh,
I feel like you've got
yes.
the right answer to this question.
Well, be an ally. Like there are different ways to connect and support. Can be as a volunteer, can be as a providing monthly funding like support, or sending. One of the things that I have been sharing is sending letters for the staff. Like we need more encouragement and we need more ways to be connected. Like there is multiple ways to really support an organization that they are doing, you know, the job that you feel kind of connected and also your not just only your belief, but you know, like what things you want to do. $1 cents change an organization. Like, you know, whatever you can give, it's going to be welcome.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's the monetary and also the non-monetary. And I think, you know, I'm a huge believer in mutual aid, developing those networks of mutual aid inside of your community. And that can be mutual aid in the form of monetary assistance, but it could also be mutual aid in the form of, you know, Elisa mentioned the example of folks who are scared to leave their homes right now. Okay, I can go get your groceries, you know, and then you can help me with XYZ. So creating those networks of care, I think is really, or care webs, as disability justice activist Leah Lakshmi Pyapsna-Samarasinha calls them so eloquently. I think that is really important, staying connected with people, you know, who may have needs. And also being an advocate for access, educating yourself about accessibility, and if you are at a community event, you know, asking the questions, you know, how could we, you know, it's not terribly, horribly expensive to get an interpreter or CART for ASL or sign language in another language, you know, trying to think about how can we pool a little bit of resources to make sure that our events are as inclusive as possible to everyone in the community. You know, thinking about learning about how you can design events that are inclusive and accessible of people with all sorts of different needs. So there's lots of things to do, and they don't all necessarily even involve monetary contribution.
We have so many other questions that have come up in the Q&A, and well, a decent moderator, aren't so talented that I know how to get these questions in a way to present to you that you can answer them succinctly. So my apologies. This is on the fault of the moderator. My apologies for those who've posed the questions. We'll have to find a way to follow them up on them afterwards, because I wanted to give Qudsi and Elisa just sort of final and last thoughts. It could be a call to action. It could be your own reflection based on this conversation. And then after you offer those final reflections, I'll hand it back to Gail. So why don't we start with you, Elisa, if that's okay?
Yes. When we are together, we are doing better. In that case, what things you have that you can support, that you can serve. For the foundations who are listening today and, you know, hearing this information, like what do you have a specific program, a specific to support these intersectionalities? Because sometimes I've seen kind of disability or immigrants, but both together, it's really limited to find grants or to find foundations who connect these two areas. In that case, there are plenty of opportunities to do it with organizations that they are doing the job. And I found a poem, if we have some time, it's short, and the name is The Invitation to a Brave Space. Let me know, I want to give time to Khadija.
I will be quick because I really want to hear the poem, so I'm self-interested. But I would say in terms of last calls to action, I have 3 quick ones. One is for our funders out there, think outside the box, as Elisa said, think about how you can fund intersectionally, think about things like cultural work and how they relate to the missions that you're seeking to fund. And relatedly, look to the people who are most impacted, who have the lived experience to guide you in what they need because they know what they need, and help them to build your funding strategy, allow them to help you build your funding strategy instead of retrofitting, which I know many of you are already doing this, and it's so important to be guided by those who know best what they need. And then, finally, and this is just a repeat of what I said earlier, think about how to make the work sustainable, specifically for the people who are laboring in these spaces, people like Elisa, so they don't burn out, so they can take a break, so they can take their sabbatical. And that should be something that is supported and not just sort of deliverables-based approaches. And Elisa, please.
Elisa, we'd love to hear the poem.
Yeah. Okay, An Invitation to a Brave Space by Nikki Scott B. Jones. Together, we will create brave space because there is no such things as a safe space. We exist in the real world. We all carry scars and we have all caused wounds. In this space, we seek to turn down the volume of the outside world. We amplify voices that fight to be heard elsewhere. We call each other to more truth and love. We have the right to start somewhere and continue to grow. We have the responsibility to examine what we think we know. We will not be perfect. It will not always be what we wish it to be, but it will be our brave space together, and we will work on it side by side.
I'm really grateful to be in this brave space with you, Elisa, and you, Kutsia. I hope that everyone can join me in thanking both of them, however you might want to do so, for sharing their insights and their time and their wisdom and their kindness on this during this conversation. I'm going to hand it back over to Gail, who will wrap up today's call. Elisa and Kutsia, thank you.
That was incredible. Marissa, Kutsia, Elisa, ending on that poem was absolutely wonderful. You will also get a link to the survey. Just want to spotlight for those who are part of the philanthropic community. We have a wonderful 2-day learning institute on climate and disability justice. And the surveys help us learn like what we can do better, what we can improve. And so we thank you for being part of this and wish everyone a wonderful filled afternoon. Thank you again.